At Thanksgiving, my sister told everyone he's just the weird uncle now. Mom laughed and said, better than being a total failure. I just looked around and said, I'll remember this. A year later, they weren't ready for my response. Look, I'm not the type to air dirty laundry online, but I need to get this off my chest before I explode. What happened last Thanksgiving changed everything between me and my family. And now that I've started down this path, there's no turning back. I was running late to Thanksgiving dinner at my mom's house. Not even that late, maybe 25 minutes tops. My startup server had crashed, and I'd spent all morning fixing it instead of helping prep dinner like I promised. Not ideal, but also not the crime of the century. When I finally walked in, everyone was already seated. Mom, my sister Audrey, her husband Gerald, their daughter Tina, my cousin Maxwell, and family friend Luis. The table went quiet when I entered, like I'd interrupted something important, probably talking about me as usual. I barely had time to put my jacket down before Audrey started with her passive-aggressive BS. She turned to Tina and explained that I was late because I was probably too busy with my little computer hobby. Then came the line that lit the fuse. She told Tina not to worry about my absence because I'm just the weird uncle now. The weird uncle, like I'm some kind of family joke. Before I could respond, my mom Terry chimed in with her own dagger. At least he's not a total failure. The whole table laughed, everyone except Maxwell, who looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Coward. I just stood there, plate in hand, watching them all laugh at my expense. 5 seconds earlier, I'd been apologizing in my head for being late. Now I was calculating how many holidays I could skip before they'd notice I was gone. Instead, I looked around at each of their faces and said very quietly that I'd remember this. They laughed harder. Gerald even mimicked my tone, like I was making some dramatic movie threat. I sat down and ate in near silence while they moved on to discussing Audrey's recent promotion and Gerald's new car. Side note, that car they couldn't shut up about? A leased BMW they definitely can't afford. But I'm the failure, right? What none of them know, what none of them have ever bothered to ask, is that my computer hobby is actually a tech startup with serious potential. We've been developing a specialized algorithm for data processing that's caught the attention of a few investors. Nothing huge yet, but promising. Look, let me give you the background these people conveniently forget. When Dad left 10 years ago, guess who dropped out of college to help Mom with bills? This failure. When Audrey needed $50K for a house down payment that she's never repaid? This weirdo. When Gerald needed his first real job and I connected him with my network? This uncle. The drive home that night was when something in me changed. The initial shock wore off, and rage took its place. White-hot, clarifying rage. I've always been the family's safety net. Their ATM, their tech support, their emotional punching bag. And for what? To be mocked at a table I helped pay for? I decided then and there, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done being reliable. I'm done caring what they think. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and started a document. At the top, I typed, "Who's the failure?" A 12-month plan. I began listing everything I knew about my sister's finances, my mother's situation, their weaknesses, their secrets. I'm not proud of this, but I've been the family fixer long enough to know where all the bodies are buried. Audrey and Gerald present as this perfect upper-middle-class couple, but they're drowning in debt. The house, the cars, the private school for Tina. It's all a facade. Gerald has a gambling problem he thinks nobody knows about. Audrey's company has been struggling, but she keeps up appearances. Mom refinanced her house twice to help Audrey, something she never offered to do for me. She's on a fixed income, but tries to keep up with her country club friends by putting everything on credit cards. They all think I'm some broke loser because I drive an old Toyota and live in a modest apartment. They don't understand that I've been pouring everything into my startup, that I've been living below my means while they finance their lifestyle with debt. By morning, I had the outline of my plan. I would focus completely on my business for 6 months. No family distraction, no bailing anyone out. Then, once we secured real funding, I would systematically dismantle the leverage they had over me while building my own. I texted Luis the next day, who I knew had been looking to invest in something. By New Year's, he became my first real business partner. For months, I posted nothing on socials. I dodged family calls. I made excuses to miss birthdays. I wanted them to think I was spiraling, too ashamed to show my face after Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, I was working 16-hour days, sleeping on my office floor, eating ramen and protein bars. My plan consumed me. Every time I felt like giving up, I remembered their laughter. The weird uncle. The total failure. I'll remember this. And now, 6 months later, we've secured our first major round of funding. 7-figure, life-changing money. But that's just the beginning. I've spent the last month researching how to buy debt, how to purchase mortgage notes, how to legally apply maximum pressure without crossing lines. I've documented every penny they've ever borrowed from me with interest calculation. I've compiled evidence of Gerald's gambling. I've tracked Audrey's company stock. Last week, I got a text from Mom asking if I was planning to make it to any family events this year. With a not-so-subtle dig about how I'm becoming a stranger, I left her on read. Today, I received a formal invite to Thanksgiving. Same house, same people, same bullshit, probably. My response? Wouldn't miss it for the world. They have no idea what's coming. Who's the failure now? Next post, how I spent the next 6 months setting up the perfect revenge against my sister and mom who humiliated me. Update 1. I didn't expect so many people to relate to my situation. For those asking, yes, I'm still going through with my plan. No, I haven't cooled down or seen the light or whatever. Some wounds don't heal, they just fuel you. Look, the day after I created my revenge document, something weird happened. I got an email from one of the investors we'd been courting for months. He wanted to meet. Not next quarter, not next month. That afternoon, Luis and I scrambled to prepare our pitch deck, barely sleeping. The meeting lasted exactly 47 minutes. By the end, we had a term sheet for 7 figures. Just like that, everything changed. But my anger? That stayed exactly the same. First thing I did after signing was buy a burner phone. Sounds dramatic, I know, but I needed to make some calls without leaving trails. I used it to contact a buddy who works in finance who owed me a favor. I asked him to discreetly check into Audrey and Gerald's financial situation without telling me how he got the info. What he found was better than I could have imagined. Gerald had a secret credit card with nearly $30,000 in gambling debts, mostly online poker and sports betting. Classic Gerald, always talking about his system while bleeding money. Even better, Audrey had no idea. Meanwhile, through some LinkedIn digging and conversations with former colleagues, I discovered Audrey's department was on the chopping block. Major layoffs coming in Q3, but no one at her level knew yet. The perfect storm was brewing, and they had no umbrella. My mom's situation was even easier to uncover. She'd been sending me thinking of you texts that always somehow ended with mentions of her property taxes or home insurance going up. One call to her neighbor, who always had a soft spot for me, confirmed she'd refinanced her house twice in the past 3 years. Both times coincided with Audrey's emergency, their kitchen renovation and Tina's private school tuition. Here's where my plan got more active. I wasn't content to just watch them implode. I wanted to be the asteroid that triggered the extinction. Through my new investor connection, I got introduced to someone on the board of Audrey's company. Over drinks, I casually mentioned hearing rumors about her department's performance issues. Never named her specifically, just planted seeds of doubt about the whole division. 2 weeks later, her department's layoff timeline moved up to Q2. Sometimes the universe just hands you gifts, you know? For Gerald's gambling debts, I went more direct. I found out which online casinos he frequented, and using some of my new capital, bought his markers through a shell company my lawyer set up. Now I owned his debt, but he had no idea. I just needed to wait for the right moment to call it in. The trickiest part was my mom's mortgage. I actually had to hire a specialist for this one. Turns out you can't just walk into a bank and buy someone's mortgage, even if you have cash. But with enough persistence and fees, We found a way. By month 4, I was technically my mother's landlord. She had no clue, still sending payments to the same bank portal as always. During all this, I maintained radio silence with the family. I'd respond to texts days later with one-word answer. When Mom asked if I could help with her property tax bill, $800, I replied that I was not in a position to help right now. The same line they'd fed me for years. Around month 5, I started the psychological warfare. Posted a photo on Instagram of me standing next to a new car, just a test drive, but they didn't know that. Changed my LinkedIn to show a new executive title. Small breadcrumbs that I knew would get back to them. Sure enough, the bait worked. Audrey texted asking if I'd gotten a new job. I left her on read for 3 days, then replied with something like that, and nothing more. Must have driven her crazy. The best part? Tina's birthday was in month 5. I sent her the latest smartphone, the exact one Audrey had told her they couldn't afford. Included a card saying, "From your weird uncle?" Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? You have no idea. Throughout all this plotting, I met Mira at a networking event. We hit it off immediately, and on our 3rd date, I told her everything. The Thanksgiving incident, my family's history of using me, my detailed revenge plan. Most people would have run for the hills. Instead, she pulled out her phone, showed me a folder titled Family Receipts, and told me her own story of dealing with toxic relatives. Mira not only supported my plan, she enhanced it. Her suggestion to track their social media for signs of financial stress was genius. Through her, I noticed Audrey suddenly selling clothes and furniture online. Gerald started posting about side hustle opportunities. Mom joined several extreme couponing groups. Meanwhile, my startup was actually taking off. The algorithm was performing beyond expectations, and we were in talks for a second funding round. The investor who initially backed us introduced me to some serious players in the industry. By month 6, our valuation had reached $40 million on paper. I made sure to keep this success completely off social media. No LinkedIn updates, no humble bragging on Facebook, nothing that would tip them off about my actual financial situation. I wanted them completely in the dark until the reveal. As the months passed, their financial desperation became more obvious. Mom started posting about medical expenses she was struggling with, issues she'd never mentioned to me directly. Audrey began fishing for job leads through mutual friends. Gerald's online activity decreased significantly, likely because he couldn't afford to gamble anymore. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I received a group text from Mom. She was still hosting, despite challenging times, and hoped everyone could make it to support each other as a family. Translation: she was hoping someone, me, would offer financial help if she got everyone together. Audrey followed up with a private message saying she really hoped I'd come because family should stick together through hard times. The same sister who'd called me the weird uncle now wanted to talk about family unity. Funny how that works. I responded to the group text with enthusiasm, saying I couldn't wait to see everyone and had big news to share. Let them think I needed their emotional support for whatever they imagined my news might be. The week before Thanksgiving, I made my final preparation, had my lawyer draw up 3 documents: a repayment agreement for Audrey's loan with interest, a new mortgage term sheet for Mom, and a debt collection notice for Gerald. Each document was placed in a separate envelope inside a manila folder labeled Family Matters. I also scheduled specific actions for Thanksgiving morning. Gerald would receive a call about his gambling debts being called in. Audrey would get her layoff notice, and Mom would receive a letter about potential foreclosure. The timing had to be perfect. I wanted them reeling before I even arrived. The night before Thanksgiving, Mira asked if I was sure I wanted to go through with everything. For a brief moment, I thought about my family. Not as they were now, but how they used to be before Dad left, before the dynamics shifted. Then I remembered last Thanksgiving, the laughter, the humiliation, the years of being taken for granted. I looked at Mira and told her tomorrow would be a day my family would never forget. Who's the failure now? I'll post the final part, the actual Thanksgiving confrontation, after the holiday. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Update 2. The aftermath has been intense, but you all deserve to know how this played out, especially after following my journey from the beginning. Look, Thanksgiving morning started exactly as planned. My phone blew up with notifications before I even got out of bed. Audrey sent a panicked text at 6:14 a.m., something about an urgent call from her boss. Gerald messaged me at 7:22 a.m. asking if I still had that contact in finance, because he needed to discuss something privately. Mom left a voicemail at 8:45 a.m. that just sounded like she'd been crying. Mira saw me scrolling through all this and just handed me coffee with this knowing smile. I didn't respond to any of them. Let them stew. Mira and I arrived at Mom's house at exactly 2:00 p.m., intentionally right on time. Not early to help, not late to make an entrance, just perfectly punctual. I'd convinced Mira to drive her new Tesla. Her choice, not a flex on my part, but the timing worked out perfectly. The look on Gerald's face when we pulled up was worth every penny of my investment. The house felt different when we walked in. The usual Thanksgiving bustle was replaced with this weird, heavy tension. The TV was off. No football. No parade. Mom's eyes were puffy from crying. Audrey kept checking her phone every 30 seconds. Gerald looked like he might throw up. Tina and Maxwell were the only ones attempting normal conversation, but even they seemed to pick up on the weird vibe. I acted completely oblivious, asked why everyone seemed so down. No one gave a straight answer. Mom muttered something about the turkey being dry. Audrey mentioned work stress. Gerald just knocked back his drink and poured another. The setup of my revenge couldn't have gone more perfectly if I'd scripted it. But the best part? I didn't have to do anything yet. Just sit back and watch them unravel. Halfway through the awkward pre-dinner mingling, Mom pulled me aside near the pantry. Her hands were shaking. She showed me a letter. The foreclosure notice I'd arranged. She asked if I knew anything about financial assistance programs. Without missing a beat, I told her I'd look into it after dinner. The relief on her face made what came next even sweeter. We all sat down to eat around 3:30 p.m. The food was mediocre at best. Mom was clearly distracted while cooking. Conversation was stilted. Someone would start a topic. It would die after 2 exchanges, then uncomfortable silence. Rinse and repeat. About 15 minutes in, I decided it was time. I raised my glass and announced I had news to share. Everyone looked up, probably expecting some minor update about my life. Instead, I started by asking if anyone remembered last Thanksgiving. The look of confusion on their faces was priceless. Maxwell immediately tensed up. He remembered. Mom and Audrey exchanged glances, clearly trying to recall what had happened. Gerald, clueless as always, just looked annoyed at the interruption. I reminded them exactly what was said, word for word. How Audrey called me the weird uncle. How Mom called me a total failure. How everyone laughed. How I said I'd remember this. The table went dead silent. Tina looked mortified. Maxwell stared at his plate. Mom started to say something about me misremembering, but I cut her off by pulling out my phone and playing the audio recording I'd secretly made that day. Yeah, I recorded it. Petty? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. Their faces as they heard their own voices, their own laughter. That was the moment I'd been waiting for all year. Then I dropped the first bomb. I calmly explained that my computer hobby had turned into a $40 million company. I showed them the latest valuation report on my phone, mentioned our recent feature in a major tech publication, told them about our new office space, which coincidentally was in the building where Audrey used to work, the building I now partially owned. Audrey's face went white. She started to say something about her own job situation, probably to ask for help, when I interrupted with bomb number 2. I knew all about her layoff. In fact, I knew before she did. I explained how I'd influenced the decision through my new connections, not directly targeting her, of course. That would be illegal. Just making sure her department was first on the chopping block. Gerald started getting angry at this point, saying I had no right to interfere in our lives like that. That's when I dropped bomb number 3. I turned to him and asked how his gambling was going, asked specifically about his poker debts, asked if he'd received any interesting calls that morning. The look on Audrey's face when she realized her husband had been hiding a gambling addiction, almost worth the price of admission alone. Gerald tried to deny it, but I pulled out the documents showing I now owned his debt. All $37,000 of it, due immediately. Mom started crying then, actually sobbing at the table. Asked what had happened to me, why I'd turned so cruel. That's when I delivered the final blow. I explained that I also owned her mortgage now, that the foreclosure notice wasn't from the bank, it was from me. The beautiful chaos that erupted at that table is hard to describe. Audrey screaming at Gerald about the gambling, Gerald yelling at me for setting him up, Mom crying about losing her house, Tina asking if she needed to change schools, Maxwell just sitting there, witnessing it all with this stunned expression. After letting them melt down for about 5 minutes, I held up my hand for silence. Surprisingly, they all shut up. Then I laid out my terms. For Mom, sell the house she couldn't afford, move into something within her actual budget, and admit she'd always favored Audrey. For Audrey, sign a legally binding document acknowledging the $50,000 she'd borrowed, with interest, to be repaid through monthly installments. For Gerald, enter gambling addiction counseling and get a second job to start paying off his debts. For all of them, a public admission, right there at the table, of how they treated me all these years. A real apology, not some half-assed excuse. The negotiation that followed was pathetic. They tried bargaining, pleading, even threatening legal action. I just sat there, eating my dry turkey, completely unmoved. Mira backed me up the whole time, occasionally adding details I'd forgotten, or clarifying terms when they tried twisting my words. Eventually, they caved. One by one. Gerald first, then Mom, finally Audrey. They signed the documents I'd brought. They made their apologies, some more sincere than others. They agreed to my terms. Dessert was served in near silence. Mom's pumpkin pie, usually the highlight of Thanksgiving, tasted like victory. As Mira and I were leaving, Tina caught me by the door. She asked if I really hated them all that much, if this revenge had made me happy, if I felt better now. Smart kid. Always was. I told her the truth. I didn't hate them. I just finally valued myself enough to stop accepting their disrespect. And no, I didn't feel better exactly, just different. Like I'd finally closed a chapter that should have ended years ago. It's been 3 weeks since Thanksgiving. Mom has listed her house and found a condo she can actually afford. Audrey has started interviewing for new positions without using me as a reference. Gerald has attended 2 GA meetings and picked up weekend work driving for a rideshare app. The family group chat is dead. Holiday plans are uncertain. Maxwell texts me occasionally, mostly to check if I'm okay. Tina still sends me TikToks like nothing happened. Do I regret what I did? Not for a second. Would I do it differently if I could go back? Maybe tone down the theatrics a bit. The audio recording was probably overkill. But here's the thing about being the weird failure of the family. When you finally succeed, no one knows how to treat you anymore. The old dynamics don't work. The familiar patterns break down. They're all walking on eggshells around me now, afraid I'll call in more debts or reveal more secrets. That's not the relationship I wanted, but it's the one they created. And now we all have to live with it. So that's my story, Reddit. From family punching bag to the one holding all the cards. From the weird uncle to the one they can't afford to mock anymore. From the total failure to their financial lifeline. Who's the failure now?